right, so we are looking at our unit circle here. And so the first thing I want to do is talk about a couple of different examples so we can talk about how we're going to use this. We're going to find just 4 things where we're doing sine and cosine, just as a little reminder. All right, 1. So you should put notes 412/18. And we're going to start with number 1. We're going to find the sine of 270. What is the sine of 270? So you're looking at here, and sine is going to be the x or the y one? Y. So what's the sine of 270? What's the y version of 270? -1. Okay? Let's do another one. What is the sine of 150? Who knows what the sine of 150 is? Sine of 150 is 1/2. Good. Right? Remember, it's the y value. It's the sine. All right, what is the cosine of 90? What's the cosine this time? Cosine of 90 is the x value. What's the x value at 90? 0. All right. What is the cosine at 300 degrees? So we're looking for 300 degrees. The cosine is? 1/2. Okay. Now remember, like, I wasn't very specific about these, but these are all over 1. Every single one of these is over 1. Okay? So if I'm going to draw a triangle, and I'm going to draw a 30, 60, 90 triangle for this. And we're going to go over this in more specific detail next, the week we come back. But if I'm trying to find something of 30, right here on the bottom, that's my adjacent. Here on the side, that's my opposite. Miss Murphy speaking. Yeah. No, she's excused for, like, the semester. Yep, bye. Okay, and this is the hypotenuse. Okay, sine is specifically defined as the opposite over the hypotenuse, where cosine is specifically designed as the adjacent over the hypotenuse. Okay, so if we were looking at 30 degrees, my adjacent is square root 3 over 2. My opposite is 1/2, and my hypotenuse is 1. So if we wanted the sine of 30 degrees, we would have to take the opposite, 1/2, over 1. But anything over 1 is just itself, right? So we'd end up with just 1/2. And the cosine of 30 would be the adjacent, square root 3 over 2, over 1, which would just be square root 3 over 2. Questions, comments, concerns about that? Okay, we're going to move on to talk about when things are greater than 360. So, I'm going to draw a little line. This is bigger than 360. Okay. So, if I said, find the sine of 390 and the cosine of 390. How do you think we'd do that, guys? How would I find the sine and cosine of something bigger? Okay. You ready? No questions? You have no idea? Okay. So here's 360. How much more to get to 390? 360 plus what gives me 390? 30. So, therefore, the sine would be 1/2, and the cosine would be square root 3 over 2. So let's write that out in words so we remember what we're doing. So we simply took 390, subtracted 360, that equals 30 degrees, and looked on our unit circle at 30. Does that make sense? If we could turn off the phones, that would be great. Okay, let's try another one. So, what if we had a really big one? I want you to find the sine and cosine of 510. You guys try it on your own. I'll give you a second. Try it on your own. Try to find the sine and cosine of 510. How are we going to do it? Okay, what did we find as our answers, guys? What's the sine of 510? Who knows? Yes, Jonas? Shh. Is the sine or the cosine? I think the sine's 1/2 and the cosine's negative square root 3 over 2. Right? Because we do 510 minus 360, and what do we get? 150. 150, and remember, the first one's the cosine and the second one's the sine. Okay? All right. Now we're going to go through and we're going to put negatives on here. So we've done bigger than 360. Now we're going to put negatives. Negatives. So I need you guys to take out your unit circle. And we're going to write in negatives. Is this zoomed in enough, or do I need to zoom it in more, guys? Okay. You guys just tell me if you need it. This is negative 360 degrees. Okay. This is negative 30 degrees. Negative 45 degrees. Negative 60 degrees. Negative 90 degrees. Negative 120 degrees. Negative 135 degrees. Negative 150 degrees. Ooh, this is negative 180, right? No. Yep. It's because if I go 180 this way, or if I go 180 this way, it's the same, right?
So it's negative 180?
Mm-hmm. Okay. So this is negative 210, negative 225, negative 240, negative 270. Am I going too fast? Okay. Negative 300. Negative 315, negative 330.
Can you go
What? Negative 30, negative 45, negative 60. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to talk about finding negatives for these. Okay, so we're going to go back to our notes. We're going to just do a quick four little thing. All right, I want you guys to find the sign of negative 90. So look on your paper. What's the sign of negative 90? Anybody have the answer? Negative 1. All right, let's do the cosine of negative 45. What's the cosine of negative 45? Look at your picture. You should have all the negatives written down. What do you got? Anybody want to raise their hand? What's the cosine of negative 45? Yes?
Square root of 2 over 2.
Square root 2 over 2. Perfect. All right. Let's try another one. What is the sign of negative 135? Who's got the answer? Okay, Layla. What's the sign of negative 135? Negative square root 2 over 2. Okay. What's the cosine of negative 180? What is the cosine of negative 180? Anybody? Negative 1. Okay? Feel pretty good about that? If you've got the negatives written on your paper, you should be in good shape. All right. Now we're going to talk about tangents. Okay, we've talked about cosine and sine. Now let's look at tangents. No, that's why we're doing more right now. Hence I wrote the word tangent. Okay, so I'm going to use the 30, 60, 90 as an example again. Here's my 30, 60, and 90. I know that this right here is square root 3 is 2. This is 1, and this is 1/2. And I'm going to just write in a different color that this is the adjacent to 30. This is the opposite, and this is the hypotenuse. Okay? Now, tangent is the opposite over the hypotenuse. Okay? Tangent is the opposite over the hypotenuse. So we're going to have to know a couple of things for tangent. Tangent of 30 degrees equals my opposite, which is 1/2. Oop, not opposite over hypotenuse. Opposite over adjacent. Sorry, guys. Opposite over adjacent. What's opposite over hypotenuse? This should be in your early notes. Sine, yeah. Opposite over adjacent is tangent. So opposite is 1/2, and adjacent is square root 3 over 2. Adjacent is square root 3 over 2. Okay, I can't have a fraction over a fraction. Doesn't work. All right, so I'm going to have to multiply it. When I divide fractions, I flip the second one and multiply. That's just my rule. Okay, what's 1 times 2? 2 times the square root of 3 is 2 square root 3. Is there a 2 on the top and the bottom? Okay, so that's just 1 over the square root 3. Uh-oh, can I have a square root 3 on the bottom? No, so we're going to multiply the top and bottom by the square root 3. Okay. So we get square root 3 over, what's 3 times 3? Square root of 9 is? 3. So the tangent of 30 is square root 3 over 3. Ugh, do you guys want to do that every single time? No. That's a lot of work, isn't it? Okay, so let's do this instead. We're going to put different possibilities right here on the bottom of our unit circle that we have to use anyways. So I know if I get 1/2 over the square root 3 over 2, that's going to give me square root 3 over 3. Look, I just eliminated the algebra that you're going to have to do for your test. Okay? All right, what other options would there be? If we've got 1/2 over square root 3 over 2, what other options could we have for tangent? Yes?
Can you just use like the negatives as tangents or they
No.
don't count?
You'll have to use negatives sometimes with tangents, but that was not my question. What other possibilities of these are we going to have to do? So we're going to have to do square root 2 over 2 over square root 2 over 2. Is the top and bottom the same? So what does that make it? What's 3 over 3 give us?
1.
So square root 2 over 2 also gives me 1. Okay. So if we have 1/2 over square root 3 over 2, do you think we'd have square root 3 over 2 over 1/2? Think we'll ever have that? Well, let's figure out what that is. If we have square root 3 over 2 times 2 over 1, right, because I flip it and multiply, I get 2 square root 3 over 2. Do those 2's cancel? 2 over 2 gives me 1, right? So I get square root 3. So this equals square root 3. There are my 3 possibilities for tangent. Now, sometimes you'll have negatives and sometimes they'll be positives, but you won't have to do that funky thing every single time. Okay, let's find another tangent so we can practice this, because your homework today is going to be all about tangents. Okay? So let's, using our unit circle, we're going to find the tangent of 300. So we're going to do this in 2 steps. First, we're going to put our big fraction, what over what? Should be 2 fractions over each other, and then we're going to put what it equals. So let's look at 300. Everybody found 300 on their unit circle? What's the opposite, or what's the y value? What is the y value for 300? What is the y value for 300? Negative square root 3 over 2. And what is the x value? 1 over 2, 1/2. Okay, now I'm going to look at my unit circle. Which one do I have square root 3 over 2 over 1/2 on my paper? You should have written it in the corner. Yes? What does that equal? Now, I've got a negative over a positive, so my total answer should be negative square root 3. See how that works? A negative over a positive gives me a negative. You ready to try another one? Do you have a question about this one before we move to another one? Yes?
What do you mean by opposite?
Okay, so opposite is, in this case, our opposite is always going to be our y value, and our adjacent is always going to be our x value. So that's a really good question. So tangent is always going to be y over x. Okay? Good question.
And then
Go ahead, man. You sure? Okay. All right, let's look at tan of negative 210 degrees. Okay, remember we should get those 2 fractions first we're going to put over there. So let's look at negative 210. Everybody found it? What's the y value for negative 210?
it's 1 over 2.
1/2. And what's the x value?
Negative square root 3 over 2.
Good. Okay, so now I'm looking at the little corner of my unit circle. What does 1/2 over square root 3 over 2 give us? Square root 3 over 3, but this is a positive divided by a negative, so my answer should be negative. I wrote it down so I don't have to do it every single time. So I just looked on my paper and I have this written there, and you can have this on your quiz. That was negative 210 degrees. Okay, let's do one more. Let's do the tan of 225. Let's do the tan of 225. Okay, what do I got, guys, for the tan of 225? Positive 225. What's the y value? Anybody? Negative square root 2 over 2. And what's the x value? Okay, and when we look at our sheet, and we should be able to kind of figure that out from there, what's my answer going to be? 1. A negative divided by a negative is a positive. Okay, that's your homework for today, guys. You've got lots of time to work on this. Okay? That's your homework for today. All right, I'm going to stop the recording. Is there any other questions before I move on? Okay, then I'm going to stop my recording.
Take this for a second.